I really put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that the accent is of a certain standard. I'm always worried that I'm going to end up on some article that's like the worst accents of all time.
Joel Edgerton, welcome to Skip Intro.
Thank you.
We have seen each other many times over the years, had many conversations around.
Oh, we've had some times.
Had some times, some different continents, and had conversations about your other films along the way. And it was really interesting. I told my son I was trying to get him to come because it's a Saturday here that we're recording. And of course, he was sleepy when I left. But he said, I might do that. And he's like, who are you interviewing? And I told him, he's like, oh, from Star Wars?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have to say, I think of you as in Loving and you know, the other stuff.
Yeah.
And for him, he's a teenager. It was Star Wars. And I was like, yeah, actually, it is.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those movies? You gone back and watched
The
them?
Star Wars ones? I don't really go back and watch my own movies. Like, you know, I seem to see them once either in preparation to do like ADR, additional dialogue recording, for anyone who's not aware of the term, and then maybe at the premiere. And then they kind of sail out of my sphere and they're for everybody else. And occasionally, like recently, I went back and watched Animal Kingdom after, because it's been more than 10 years. Just kind of curious to see how it held up. And I was happy to say it held up really well. But yeah, I'm not at home in my spare time rolling through my catalogue.
Okay, so you travel all over. You were just in Poland. You're coming straight from there, so thank you.
Yeah.
So do people recognize you for different things in Australia and in London and, let's say, L.A.?
There's this moment that occurs when anybody, particularly it's at airports, I would say, someone walks up or that you see them coming, and after they say, oh, you know, usually I'm that guy who they're like, you're that actor, and or... I'm like, all right, so what do they know me from? And I'm quite often surprised by it. I think usually I can assess, you know how you can assess people immediately, like, oh, this is a warrior guy, or, you know, this is if you're in America and, like, say, Boston, you know, this would be a Black Mass moment. And it's kind of beautiful to try and predict and then realise how wrong you are. Like, someone that you think is going to say, Warrior's my favourite film, says, I just love Kinky Boots. And you're like, oh, okay. You just never know.
Yeah, that's so great. I know. I just think about you've done so much when I look at it. All right, so let's talk about Train Dreams because this is such a special film. You're in nearly every frame of it, and you say very little. It's not some monologue we can point to. It's how you are basically every man in one man. And I loved it.
Oh, great.
The duality of loneliness, and you need connection and loss, and it's so many themes all in one, but you just glide through the film.
What are you thinking about?
I was thinking that we ought to get married.
It's based on a novella. You had actually read it a long time ago and tried to get the rights, but you didn't.
Yeah, so I'd been gifted the novella after making Boy Erased. There's something particular when someone gives you a book as a gift. You know, it's different from obviously walking into a bookstore. Someone's handed you a book, maybe because they think that it'll connect with you in some way. So I read the book. After I put it down, I had inquired after the rights, and I think I suspect there was a number of reasons why. I mean, the fact that it's a celebration of an ordinary life that reminded me of the things I've heard about but never knew personally about my great-grandfather and my descendants who were all farmers and working men who helped in their own way build that kind of interior of Australia and farm the land and so on. That it was a celebration of an ordinary life. It was a kind of what people might say a neo-Western, but to me a philosophical exploration of just life lived itself. And I think I saw myself in the character more than, I think think I went to drama school thinking that I could pull anything out of myself, and that was the joy of being an actor. Like as a kid, reaching into a dress-up box and saying, all right, now I'm a wizard, and now I'm this, and now I'm that. It's very rare that I go to work thinking, how can I put my own feelings, my own experience on screen? I think because I always thought I hadn't had the experience that was worth showing. You know, like I remember at drama school, everyone going, you know, you're a better actor if you've been through a lot of turmoil in your life. And I was like, well, by that standard, it makes me a terrible actor because my life's been pretty breezy. My upbringing, I was very well looked after. I have loving parents. I'm like, so where's my turmoil? But now I'm in the middle of my life, and I, you know, when Clint reached out to me, I realised there was so much that I am that's in this character that it was a chance to forget about the playing dress-ups aspect and reaching for something I'm not, and kind of open up my chest cavity and go, these are my feelings about loss, and these are my feelings about the confusion of being a new dad, which I had twin 2-year-olds at the time we shot it. And this is my frustration about not being able to be close to my family because I go away for work. So there's so much of Robert in me that I thought I don't really need the words. This is the most personal thing I could do on screen. And so it was a different thing for me. And I believe each film for me as an actor, you have to learn from it and as its own thing that needs its own rhythm, and that you maybe need to think about a different set of tools for each project.
So when you got the script, right? I mean, a lot, obviously, Will Patton is the narrator, right? And it's got a great cast. Felicity Jones is amazing, and always. So she adds such a great element in anything she's in. What was that first read like when you got the script in your hand and you're like, okay, we're doing this? Because I'm fascinated by that. I ask everybody I speak with, like, because you only get one first read, right?
Yeah.
You get only one first impression.
It's a great point. You know, for anyone who's reaching out to an actor, it's a mystery, right? Is this going to put the hooks in them or not? I was laughing before because actors often, there's a joke that the way they read a script is like rubbish, 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 my line, rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. And if I were reading this script like that, it'd be like rubbish, 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 rubbish. When am I going to talk? Rubbish, rubbish, rubbish. Because Robert barely says a word, you know. When I read the script, it had a different charge to it because, so I'd read the novella, I was very familiar with it, and then 4 or 5 years later, Clint reached out to me saying, would I consider doing the movie? And I thought, wow, did he somehow mysteriously know that I've already read this, I'm already very much enamored with it? Because normally you get a script based on a book and then quickly you try and devour the book to fill your head with all of the things, right? So me reading the first draft of Clint's adaptation was more of like, how did he crack the safe? Because it's a complicated thing to get into, to imagine that book as a film. It's more fractured. It's like memories cut up and thrown on the floor almost, if you were to use an image like that. How did he adapt the book? And he had done it so successfully. So part of me was going, wow, he really strung this together in his own way that honours the book. I was very moved by it, which was always a good sign. I've heard Kerry Condon say the same, that she was in tears reading the script. And quite often, if that happens as an actor, that's a bit of a hook, you know. And I just thought he had managed to succinctly build a screenplay that when or if you've seen the film, it spans the entire life of my character. And yet it doesn't ramble on for hours. Like the book is 118 pages long. The film is an hour and 40 minutes, but you feel like you've lived a whole life, which is an extraordinary achievement in and of itself, I think. But reading the first draft, I was like, right, I cannot wait to meet Clint. And then I watched Jockey, and I was like, he can make a film, like well. And then I met him and realised how much I trusted him and how reliable he was, almost like he was a director version of the character in the film, if you know what I mean. Like, kind, generous, a good listener. He definitely spoke more than my character did. It would have been a weird meeting if he didn't say a word.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, well, the movie, it says so much with so little. We're not traveling all over. We're really just in Idaho, and we're with him, Robert, and his work and building. It's very, I love how muscular it is. It's so much about the physicality of, the trees, the logging, the building the house, the dirt, the water, the wind. I loved all of that, obviously. But what really struck me, too, was how special that time period was, where at one point you're building the railroad and then it's like, oh, and in 10 years it was done. All that work we did was for nothing. It was modernization.
There's a new bridge and you can stare at the old one, yeah.
It's old and the other one's a relic. And how much that period of time in our history, how much changed for this character. And that is so rare because now it's like the phone. I was having this, thinking about this the other day with friends. It's like, how do we stay in touch? Like in the 80s, in the 90s, did we write letters to each other?
I got a text message the other day from one of my very first pen pals that I met on a holiday, and we started writing to each other. And I remember the excitement of going to the letterbox and getting letters and then writing a letter back. And that continued until email came along, and then we skipped over to email, and now we're texting each other still. I remember my grandmother, when I first pointed a Hi8 video camera at her that my brother and I got, and she froze and posed like she was about to take a photograph. And I said, it's okay to move. And to her, the world was moving too quickly, she is the generation of the character I play in the film, is this idea that everything's moving so blisteringly quick. And of course, we know we're moving in our own, frenetic paced kind of advancement of technology. And it's funny to look at a period film, and I always ask, why do a period film? How does it connect with us? And of course, in our film, we see in beautiful ways and in devastating ways that we just don't change as people. The beautiful sides of it is we're always going to look for love. We're always going to want to build family. We're always going to have anxieties around that. We're always going to rely on each other in friendship, which is beautiful. Human beings prop each other up. But the negative side of things don't change. Like we see in the film the mistreatment of migrant workers. And we go, oh, that hasn't changed. In fact, maybe that's intensified. And this idea of staring down the face of technology, that is, there are new developments before we've really even, harnessed our ability to understand the last one. Robert, my character, stares at a chainsaw at some point in the film, and you go, does that not resonate? He's wondering, how's this chainsaw going to affect my industry? Like, how's AI going to affect us, And like you said, you build a bridge, people die, you break your back doing it, and then a few decades later, no one's using that bridge because there's a brand spanking new one. And I think these things resonate with us.
I was so moved thinking about how history has been built on the backs of thousands of Roberts. And you represent one version that could easily be forgotten. What was the story you wanted to tell on screen?
I think it's quite lovely that the film, and I kind of want people to evaluate presence, the presence of mind, the presence of a moment. I think as the world moves quickly, where I'll talk about myself here. I find myself staring down the barrel of tomorrow and what's in the future, to the point where I get distracted from what's in front of me right now, or I sort of puzzle over the past and the choices I've made and where they've got me to. And I find thinking about the past and the future while being in the present sort of dilutes the present. And I feel like the idea that you could look back on your life and regret not cherishing all of the things that you had in a given moment. And by things, and I think most people would agree, at the end of your life, on your deathbed, you're not going to, I heard someone say this, it's the last thing you want to look at you know, like, bring me my trophies one more time. I just want to have a look at them. You know, where's my university degree?
Yeah.
It was this doctor I saw on Instagram, and I was like, he's so right. He said, what people want is the memories of people and the people they love around them. So for me, it's about harnessing the moment, holding on to the things that you have that you cherish. And the film, in its own way, it's for everyone, it's a different thing, this film, I think, but it has this power of going, I just want to get a hold of and hug the people that I love the most and remember that this is important now. That for me is potent. And the other thing is just like to remind us all that as ordinary as you think you are, just living life is epic and majestical. Falling in love, having a family, going to work, they're not small things, you know?
Yeah, I think I read where Clint said somewhere that, you know, most of us won't have, you know, impactful lives in the course of history, but it doesn't mean that we don't live very meaningful, passionate lives.
Yeah.
And I just love that idea of every day just living is its own accomplishment. And I loved what it said here about the manual labor and the communal work of achieving that and achieving it together. And, you know, I've been called a tree hugger in the past. So I do want to talk about the trees because that to me was so overwhelming. The trees falling. How did you shoot that? What was that like in the being actually in the presence of that?
Yeah, being in the presence of big trees in general, being in the forest, first of all, you realize, you know, how easy you breathe, how good it feels to breathe in there. I feel like audiences watching nature is like a dog watching another dog on screen. You know, have you ever seen a dog, you know, is lying on the rug and then a dog comes on the TV and they're like, their ears prick up and it's suddenly like, so to see ourselves, and I think we see ourselves in nature, I think there's a kind of hits you in the heart spot. And certainly by being there rather than just watching it on a screen, I felt it. And then you knew in the film, you know, because we weren't going to just run in there with chainsaws and axes and go, okay, let's cut everything down and film it. We wanted to sort of have a small footprint. So they'd earmarked 3 trees on private land. And it's amazing, the entire crew stopped everything they were doing. Anyone who was at unit base came to watch. And it was like some, I don't want to say religious experience, but some like people wanted to be there. Everyone went dead silent, not just because we were filming it, and watched as this thing slowly fell. And it's kind of amazing, the sound of it, how slow it seems to move, the power of it. I just found, I know I've got so many videos on my phone of the forests and waiting for those trees to fall. And the big ones, you know, hats off to the unsung, often heroes of films, which is, in this case, I'm going to sing out Alexandra, our production designer, who built the massive base of a tree with a wedge in it so we could pose like those old photographs of the men standing either side of the tree on planks with someone lying down in the cut wedge, because we're obviously not going to cut down a 400- or 500-year-old tree. She built a 20-foot high version of a base of that and covered it in moss and made it look real, and then, you know, invisible visual effects create the sense that that is a real tree. And I love being in nature shooting. I don't know whether it's because I grew up in a similar kind of environment on the edge of a national park or whatever, but I'm sure it's complicated for the crew with equipment more than it is for us breezy actors walking in.
Walking in.
Carry my backpack. Where's my latte?
Somehow I doubt that's you. The other question I want to kind of unpack is an actor will always go back to the script, you know, and it's all about the words. It's a script, how this written. As we've discussed, there really was no script for you. So on a given day, how did you communicate with Clint? Like, what was your direction and how did you prepare for that? And particularly in some of the scenes around the grief or those great scenes with the other men where so much is being said, but not one person saying a word.
I just realized my job as Robert was to listen to everything and observe everything. And there was enough words and conversations. You know, Robert's one thing with his wife. And it was important to build a sense of humour there, even though I decided Robert's sense of humour was like bad jokes and dad jokes.
Jokes, yeah.
He says that the fish trap she's building looks like a terrible bassinet, and then no one really finds it funny but Robert. and building a life with her, with Felicity and Katie, the character of the daughter. And then with Arne, it was a case of I decided, like I do with Bill, I find him very funny and I love listening to him.
Right, that's William Macy. William
Macy, and just go. I love, you know, because he represents all those people that are transient people that you work with, you love seeing, but you may never ever exchange phone numbers with, kind of thing. My job was to listen and trust that I knew all the things that he'd been through, because I mean, really, my life is intersected right now with who this guy is. You know, the only thing, thank God, that I haven't had to deal with is the stuff that he deals with in the middle of the film. However, I'm sure any parents would say the same, that if you have a kid or kids, that your mind has gone to the worst places, because to me, the moment they entered the world, I was like, all right, I have a new greatest fear.
Yeah, definitely.
And leading up to the birth of them, there was so many things that I got so scared about, to the point where often when I even talk about it, I'm like, I knew that when I went to work for Clint to deal with those scenes, oftentimes I look at a script and go, okay, there's that day, I've got to do this. It's like I'm going to be really upset or whatever. How am I going to do that? And for this film, I was more concerned that I would be more emotionally available and negate what Robert's character is, which is someone who pushes feelings down. We knew that Robert was sad and upset, but he's not someone that would want to cry in front of other people, like a lot of I'm sure my grandfather was like that. I saw him once crying, and he was in a room by himself with his back to the corner wiping his eyes. That just because you don't see some men cry, it doesn't mean that there's maybe a bigger well of tears inside of them because they're not letting them out. I mean, it was hard for me to consider going to work thinking about losing my kids, because that's what you got to do in order to get your imagination there. But easy in that I feel like it wasn't that hard to stretch my imagination to, you know.
Yeah, it is a beautiful, beautiful film, like I said, and I love watching the discovery of it for people, and I feel like because people get something different from it, depending on what your frame of mind when you're watching it, where you are watching it, where you are in your life, whether you're a teenager or your back half or in the middle. I think people take different things from it. And I think you are such and I mean this in the most complimentary way, you're such an actor's actor. You're so good in everything. And it's whether it's like Black Mass or Warrior or Kinky Boots, Red Sparrow, you walk on and you elevate every scene that you're in. But it's so fun to watch you take this whole movie on your shoulders and take us on this journey. So I'm very, very happy for you and very proud of you. And I love that people are discovering it. So I did want to ask you a question, because you did a lot of Sundance, like you've done a lot of independent films, right? I think, Animal Kingdom we talked about I remember that. I went to Sundance for 25 years or something. Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to date myself too much, but it was definitely the 90s. And I decided when Redford retired, I retired. And it's kind of right when I came to Netflix. And obviously we just lost Bob. Did you have any experiences for him, or did you get anything from attending Sundance? I
mean, I love him so much, and yet we've never met. And I've been to Sundance. I feel like maybe he was playing Where's Waldo with me or something, because I've been there so many times. First time I was there was I think it was 1999 or 2000. I was going there with a friend who was in a film. And then I've been there with Kinky Boots. I've been there with Animal Kingdom. I've been there, so many movies. My brother's had 7 short films there, and I've been to most of those premieres. I love that festival so much, partly also because it was my first ever proper film festival to go to. So, I don't know, I just have such a soft spot for Sundance, and it won't change just because it's moved to
No.
Boulder. Is that right? Another cool city. But I have secretly felt sorry for all the people of the town.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, in and around that area who maybe don't want 40,000 idiots like me turning up every year.
Yeah.
They can finally have a little break from us.
Yeah.
I just recently heard that when we were there for Animal Kingdom, that apparently, because it was me and Ben Mendelsohn, Sullivan Stapleton, David Michaud, obviously, and all the gang, and that people were like in the night, because I don't party anymore that much. I don't get FOMO, and I really don't go out much. That we were out every night, and people were like, "Where are the Animal Kingdom guys tonight?" It's like we had some sort of reputation.
Yeah, well, it's the Aussies.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Where are the Animal Kingdom guys
Where
tonight? We're
are
going to
they
watch
on
them
Main
make fools
Street?
of themselves. We'll see them break some stuff.
Well, I think about, too, that your accent is still so strong, and you live in London, you've been in America a long time.
Yeah.
But we could hear you coming down the hall with the simplest words. Do you still have a hard time pronouncing some American words?
Yes. If you put too many R's, this is a note for all screenwriters in the future. Anyone that I'm going to work with. Too many R's in a row. Or like a word that ends in R and the next word starts in an R with another R in the middle.
Like remember, or is that okay?
Remember, yeah, remember's okay on its own. But if you put a couple of R's in the word before it and the word after it, then I'm like, come on, guys.
Like warrior.
Yeah, mirror and warrior. And
Yeah.
I think those are the harder ones for me. But there's definitely times on set where because I'll always try first, and then if I really have to, I'll go up to the director or the writer and I'm like, is there another way we can say this? I really put a lot of pressure on myself to make sure that the accent is of a certain standard. I'm always worried that I'm going to end up on some article that's like the worst accents of all time in movies. Like it's like if that's almost like the kryptonite, you know. I've got to stay away from that. And so I'm like I try and be really fastidious about, to the point where when we were preparing for Train Dreams, and even though Robert doesn't speak much, I find accents harder to do when I don't have much to say. Black Mass, to me, I had so much to say that I could stop thinking about the accent. But if you're in a scene and you have like 2 words, I would send Clint long voicemails of me talking and just say, tell me what you think of this. Is this in the right zone? Because the terror for me is, you know, I know what it's like to be a director. If an actor turns up and they start doing the thing and you're like, oh, if you were hearing something as a director for the first time, you go, actually, we're filming this and this doesn't feel right. So I always want my director to feel like I've already taken the accent for a walk with them before we start shooting. So I was sending him voice notes, and every time I'd fire off a text, it was almost like I was biting my nose going, what's he going to say? And I'm always like, to directors, say, be 100% honest with me. Do not mince words with me. My ego's somewhere between fragile and sturdy, but I'd rather it just be knocked around a bit for the sake of the movie. So we helped work out exactly how Robert would sound, along with all the conversations about his level of intelligence and so on. Because Robert's he's not super well educated, but he's not an idiot. You know, there's different kinds of wisdom and intelligence.
All right, I'm going to ask you some questions that I ask everybody who comes on the show, a little bit more reflective, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about Australia. Okay, so how has birth order shaped your life, who you are as a person?
I think I'm a people pleaser. I think I came into the world, I had an older brother who, like, the moment I walked, he'll laugh about this because it's true. Apparently, the moment I stood up, he pushed me down. and I was a whinger. I was a dobber.
What's that mean?
I was like snitch. I was snitches get stitches, you know.
Ah.
I was like, Mum, Dad, you know, Nash did this. In all honesty, I think it shaped me into being someone that felt like I needed to be heard in the world and impress. And maybe that's the reason I'm even sitting here, is that I mean, is not being a performer sort of a way to be seen and heard and loved and all that stuff? Yeah, I think I had to find my place in the world, and I realised that it was maybe a little performative, even though I'm an introvert.
Yeah, I was just going to say you're a little, I wouldn't think of you as an extrovert.
I think COVID taught me that I was misperceived myself, that I just thought, oh, if you're an actor, you must be an extrovert. But I realise it's not necessarily so.
We know you don't have FOMO, but what do you love missing out on that other people love to do? What is your JOMO, joy of missing out?
I will say that I just experienced FOMO for the first time intensely the other day because my wife got to go on a polar bear conservation expedition and was like right up close with the polar bears. Not close enough to be mauled to death, but close enough to see them. And I was like, wow, I remember that feeling of intense FOMO. Happy to miss out on, this is going to get me in so much trouble, kids' parties. Other kids' parties. They'd be like, really? Wish I could have gone. Oh, well. Not to say, mind you, I do get surprisingly interesting conversations out of them when I have gone. But
sure.
Yeah.
That's one thing you're
Other
happy
kids'
to
parties.
You sit down. That's a good answer.
Next time at a kids' party, that's going to be like, hey, I listened to that podcast. So you're stoked to be here, aren't you?
Joey turns 5. Thanks for coming. Yeah. All right. We know as parents, we have rational fears. We have rational fears in the world for our children, and that's normal. That's part of being a human. But what are some of your irrational fears that make absolutely no sense? And do you have any of them?
Irrational ones. Well, spiders are pretty rational, right?
Especially from Australia. They're like, can kill you there, right?
Yeah, but you'd think I'd be like tough enough to be like, yeah. My mother-in-law will pick a spider up with her hands. Like she's tougher than me by far. Here's a weird one. I'm not scared of flying, and I'm not scared of this, but I realise my anxiety just goes out of control. I get anxious preparing to go to the airport. So I get fear of packing or something, you know what I mean? I tell you though, here's one you may have never heard of. Have you ever heard of anyone scared of bananas?
No.
Look it up. It's a real thing. I know 2 sisters. I'm not going to name them. One of them was scared of bananas, and they had a fight at a dinner party. One of them starts peeling a banana and showing the other one and waving it in front of it, and you could see she was going, "Get it away from me!" Like it was something frightening to her. And then her sister starts eating it like really with open mouth. So the other sister runs to the kitchen and gets a wooden spoon and starts licking the wooden spoon. So one of them had a fear of wood and licking wood, and the other one had a fear of bananas. And we watched this sort of like really petulant fight play out. That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
That is really weird.
But me, packing.
That's fair enough. All right, so this one is very reflective. What's one core memory that's etched into your mind? An indelible experience, a revelation, a turning point?
Here's one that relates to the work. I remember being ashamed of and afraid of the fact that I wanted to go and study to become an actor. My father was an attorney or a lawyer, and my mum was, had the hardest job in the world. She was a mum, a housewife, which I always thought was like, oh yeah. And now I'm like, that's the biggest job you could ever do in the world. Anyway, for some reason I thought I had to impress my parents that I was going to do something typical, responsible stuff. Secretly, I was investigating going to drama school. And my father was aware, but he sort of... I was lying to him and going, I'll probably do this. And then, and I was like... Anyway, he took me aside, and he's done this a number of times. And he said, listen, do what you want to do in life. Like, follow, if you have an interest or a passion, follow it. Be open to change your mind. But he said, don't worry about money and economics and all that stuff. He said, I think if you follow your dream, that money will fall into place and then be open to change your mind. And he was essentially saying to me, I know what you're wanting to do and go after it, you know. And what was cool about it is I knew he was nervous for me. Because, like, you know, your kid goes, I want to be a musician or I want to be an artist of some kind. Of course, you're like going, God, I hope it works out. Not for their sake, because I think he was worried for my sake that, you know, my bubble would burst or something.
What was it that made you want to be an actor? Was it?
I saw a production of The Crucible starring an actor called John Howard, who also happened to be the name of our subsequent Prime Minister at the time. And he was playing John Proctor, and it was so powerful. It was a school excursion. And I asked my parents if I could go back again. And that was sort of year 11 at school, which meant travelling all the way to the city and going to the Opera House. And along with being in school plays and doing, you know, seeing him do that, I was like, I wonder if I could be him. So then I went to drama school, and then it took me about 6 years, 3 years of drama school, and then about 3 years later, I was on the same stage. And I think that's when my folks were like, okay, he's going to be okay.
I think about the Aussies that come over. We know them well. Russell Crowe, Nicole Kidman, Naomi, Heath, now the Hemsworths, Joel, your brother Nash.
Yeah.
But like it is really, it's very hard to do. It's not like there's a bus that takes you and be like, hey, Hollywood wants you. It is it's challenging.
It feels to me like, you know, over the years, and Peter Weir, and, you know, talking on the director side, Peter Weir and Fred Skepsey and Philip Noyce, Bruce Beresford, those guys, all the directors sort of, they built a tunnel for the directors. And, you know, I imagine it like a mining thing. You know, Russell and Nicole kind of helped make that mine a little wider, a little taller, so we could all walk upright instead of like crawling through it. And those guys had it tougher, I think, in a way. And then, you know, over the years, every Australian actor that's gone through, it's like their shoulders have rubbed a little bit more of the rock away, and now the tunnel's a bit wider, if you know what I mean, to use a terrible sort of analogy.
No, I love it.
And now to the point where I see some TV shows and go, oh, that was fantastic. Who's that person? And then I discover they're Australian, because in the old days you had to sort of have a career in Australia and then you were allowed to crawl through that tunnel.
Right.
Now what you find is a lot of Australian young actors, you know, just get in the tunnel. Straight in the tunnel. Yeah. And partly because, and this is, you know, and I'm joking about it, but part of it is sadly because of the culture in Australia there's not a lot of movies being made. There's a lot being made here in the US. And people like me, I think we don't have a responsibility, but here's what happens, and it's an economic situation. People get a successful thing going in Australia, like, say, you make a movie and it makes some money, or people over here go, wow, that was good. First thing they do is they come here, because you can get paid as a screenwriter properly. You don't really get remunerated very well for your art in Australia, and it's because we've got a small population. Government subsidies are amazing, but they're not going to be like overpaying screenwriters. So unfortunately, people get success and then disappear. What I love is people like Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe, Nicole, Toni Collette. They go back and, you know, they do a few projects in the US or Europe, come back and they make a movie or two in Australia. And I think it's really important for directors, writers and actors not to do it in a charitable way, but just to keep participating in an Australian industry so that it can keep flourishing. Because the tunnel's there.
Yeah.
You just sleep going back and forth.
I mean, look at Margot Robbie. She did years on Neighbours and came through.
And then you got, you know, wonderful Chris Hemsworth who's bringing big projects to Australia. So it's not just about, are you telling Australian stories? It's like, you know, Chris has made so many big movies back in Australia, selfishly because he wants to be at home and surf and be with his family. But the result is so many crew people get to work on a bigger thing. So a lot of these Australian actors and filmmakers are actually, boomeranging back, doing their thing and cycling around. And I think that's sort of cool and important.
Well, it's great to see you, Joel. And I love we're both kind of channeling Train Dreams. I definitely thought about it this morning because the denim, and you've got your denim, and the costumes were amazing.
Ralph. I'm waiting for a Ralph Lauren contract. If he's out there listening, I was like, watch Train Dreams and then we'll talk.
Yeah, double RL. Here you come. It's perfect. It was beautiful. All right, great to see you, Joel. Thanks so much.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Yeah.